Hi everyone. I never thought I would be sharing something this personal on the internet. But sometimes the hardest betrayals teach the most important lessons. This is the story of how my aunt took a recipe that was incredibly special to me, used it to create a successful business, and then unbelievably asked me to come work for her. Listen to the end to see how I found the courage to stand up for myself, use my own voice, and understand that forgiveness doesn't always mean forgetting. So before we get into the full story, take a moment to grab a warm drink and get comfortable. To really understand this story, you need to know what cooking means to me. My name is Sophia, and I grew up in a small 3-bedroom house in Rhode Island. After my grandfather passed away, my grandmother, Nana Isabella, moved in with us. Money was always tight. My dad worked 2 jobs as a mechanic, and my mom took care of 3 kids while working part-time as a nurse. But even though we didn't have much money, we never felt poor. Our kitchen was always full of food, warmth, and love. Nana Isabella came from a tiny village just outside Naples, Italy. She brought with her a collection of recipes that had been passed down for generations, each one connected to a story, a memory, and a piece of our family's history. But there was one dish that was more special than all the others: her pasta e fagioli con le cozze, which means pasta and bean soup with mussels. This wasn't the kind of pasta e fagioli you might see in Italian-American restaurants. This version was unique, something that could transport you straight to the Bay of Naples with just one bite. The broth had layers of deep, rich flavors that came from simmering bones and fresh herbs for hours. The beans were creamy but still held their shape. The pasta was cooked just right, not too soft, not too firm. And the mussels. Oh, the mussels were added at just the perfect moment, giving the broth a hint of the sea without making them tough or chewy. But the real magic was in the sofrito, the mix of herbs and vegetables that formed the base of the soup. Nana had a very specific way of chopping and cooking them, making sure everything melted together into a flavorful paste. This was the heart of the dish, the part that made it truly unforgettable. And then, there was one last ingredient, something that only our family knew about, something that gave the soup a taste no one else could figure out. "This is our family's heart in a pot," Nana would say in her thick Italian accent as I watched her cook. "This recipe has kept us together through war, through hard times, through long journeys across the ocean. When we lost everything else, we still had this." From the time I was 6 years old, I was always by Nana's side in the kitchen. While my siblings played outside or watched TV, I stood on a stool next to her, watching her every move. I learned how she chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and tasted every dish with care. By the time I turned 12, she decided I was ready to learn the full recipe, including the secret ingredient. It was a big moment, almost like a family tradition being passed down. "Sophia," she said, gently holding my face in her wrinkled hands, "I am teaching you this recipe because I see in you the same love for cooking that I have. This is not just food, it is our story, our love, in a bowl. You must promise me that you will always respect it." I made that promise with all the seriousness a 12-year-old could manage. What I didn't understand at the time was just how much that promise would shape my future. After high school, while most of my friends went off to college to study business or medicine, I chose a different path. I enrolled in culinary school. It wasn't the safest choice, and my parents worried about how hard it was to make a living in the restaurant world. But they supported me because they could see how much cooking meant to me. When I told Nana, who was in her 80s by then, she smiled with pride. "Just remember," she said, "anyone can learn technique, but cooking with heart, that is a gift." As I went through culinary school and started working in restaurants, I kept Nana's recipe close to my heart. I never added it to a menu or shared all the details with my coworkers. Sometimes I would make it for close friends at special gatherings, but I always treated it like something sacred. It wasn't about keeping a secret. It was about honoring something that had been trusted to me. When Nana passed away during my 2nd year as a sous chef at a respected Italian restaurant in Providence, her recipe became even more important to me. At her funeral, as I stood beside her casket, I made a silent promise. One day, I would open my own restaurant, and her pasta e fagioli would be the heart of the menu. I would do it the right way, using the best ingredients, staying true to the tradition, and finding my own ways to honor her memory through my cooking. This is where my Aunt Valerie comes into the story. She isn't actually my aunt by blood. She's my mother's stepsister. She became part of the family when my grandfather remarried after my grandmother passed away. Unlike the rest of us, who came from a simple, hard-working background, Valerie always had big dreams of wealth and status. She married a rich man, divorced him for even more money, and spent most of her time going to fancy charity events and country club gatherings. Valerie and I had always had a complicated relationship. She would show up at family events with expensive gifts and stories about her travels to exotic places, making little comments about how quaint our family traditions were. She never said anything outright mean, but there was always a feeling that she saw herself as above us, like she was doing us a favor by spending time with her stepfamily. Still, she was family, and we made sure to include her in everything. I remember Nana being especially patient with Valerie. She would invite her into the kitchen, trying to teach her simple cooking skills, but Valerie would just laugh and say things like, "Oh, Isabella, why would I need to learn to cook when I can eat at the best restaurants?" Nana would smile kindly and reply, "Because food made with love will always taste better than anything you can buy, no matter how expensive." After Nana passed away, Valerie suddenly became very interested in our family recipes. She started calling me often, asking what seemed like harmless questions about Italian cooking. At the time, I thought it was sweet that she wanted to connect with our family's traditions. "Sophia, sweetie," she said on one of those calls, "I'm hosting a dinner party for some very important people, and I thought it would be special to serve something from our family's history. Would you mind sharing your grandmother's pasta e fagioli recipe? Just the basics. My chef will take care of the rest." Looking back, I should have been more careful. But when you're grieving, it's easy to let your guard down. I was touched that she wanted to honor Nana's memory. I didn't give her the full recipe. I left out the secret ingredient and some of the small but important techniques. But I shared enough that a skilled chef could come close to making it the right way. The next time I saw Valerie was 3 months later at my cousin's wedding. She greeted me with an unusual amount of warmth. "Sophia, that recipe was incredible. Everyone at my dinner party loved it. You know, you really should do something with these family recipes instead of spending your time working for other people." I thanked her for the compliment and told her about my dream of opening my own restaurant one day. I explained that I was saving up money and working on a business plan, but it would take time. "Well, if you ever need an investor, let me know," she said with a playful wink before walking off to chat with other guests. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Valerie was always making big, dramatic statements that didn't mean much. I never imagined she would actually take an interest in the restaurant business. 6 months later, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a post from a well-known local food reviewer. They were raving about a new Italian restaurant that had just opened in Federal Hill, the part of Providence known as Little Italy. The photo showed a bowl of pasta e fagioli, and something about it made my stomach clench. It looked way too familiar. The caption read, "The most authentic pasta e fagioli I've ever had outside of Naples." Chef Lorenzo at the newly opened Nana's Table is bringing old-world Italian cuisine to Providence with recipes passed down through generations of his family. I felt a creeping sense of unease. I immediately searched for the restaurant online and found its website. The elegant logo read Nana's Table in beautiful, flowing script. On the About Us page, there was an old, sepia-toned photograph of an elderly Italian woman, definitely not my Nana, and a story about Chef Lorenzo De Santo, who supposedly inherited his grandmother's recipes from the Amalfi Coast. But then I saw something that made my heart pound. The description of their signature dish read, "Our pasta e fagioli con le cozze follows a closely guarded family recipe, featuring a secret ingredient that gives it an unforgettable depth of flavor that has been the talk of food critics across New England." I felt sick. There was no way this was just a coincidence. Pasta e fagioli is a common dish, but the addition of mussels? That was rare, something unique to my family's version. Hardly anyone outside of that small region near Naples made it that way. And the mention of a secret ingredient? That was the final proof. With shaky hands, I grabbed my phone and called my mother. "Mom, have you heard anything about Aunt Valerie opening a restaurant?" There was a long pause. Too long. Finally, she sighed. "Oh, Sophia, I was hoping you wouldn't find out this way." She explained that Valerie had opened a restaurant, but she had asked the family to keep it a secret until after the grand opening. Apparently, she had teamed up with a well-known chef she had met at one of her fancy charity events, and they had been working on the concept for months. "But Mom," I said, my voice rising, "they're using Nana's recipe, her pasta e fagioli, and they're saying it came from this chef's family." Another pause. More hesitation. "Valerie said she changed it a lot," my mother finally said. "She told us it's just inspired by our family recipe. She didn't think you'd mind since you weren't using it for a business." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. The betrayal wasn't just from Valerie. I had never really trusted her anyway, but from my own family. They had known. They had kept this from me. They knew what Nana's recipe meant to me. They knew my dream of opening my own restaurant one day. And still, they had stayed silent. That night, I drove straight to Federal Hill and walked into Nana's table. The place was packed, with people waiting an hour and a half just to get a table. The atmosphere was exactly how I had always pictured my own future restaurant. Warm, rustic, yet elegant. The walls were decorated with black and white photos of the Italian countryside. The lighting was soft and intimate. Everything about it felt like a stolen version of what I had imagined for myself. Then I saw her. Valerie stood across the dining room, dressed in an expensive outfit, floating from table to table like she was royalty. She smiled and laughed, basking in the attention. She hadn't noticed me yet. I took a deep breath and walked up to the hostess stand. "Can I see a menu while I decide if I want to wait for a table?" I asked. She handed me one, and there it was, the first item under signatures, Nana's pasta e fagioli con le cozze. The description went on to say how the recipe had sustained the chef's family through the hardships of World War II. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. That was my family's story. That was my Nana's legacy. I must have made some kind of sound because, across the room, Valerie finally looked up. Our eyes met. For just a second, her confident smile faltered. But she quickly recovered, excusing herself from the table she was at and making her way toward me. "Sophia," she said brightly, her voice filled with fake warmth. "What a lovely surprise. I was going to call you tomorrow to invite you for a proper dinner. Isn't this exciting?" Her voice was cheery, but her eyes were sharp. She was watching my reaction carefully. I stared at her, gripping the menu. My voice was quiet but firm. "You stole my recipe." Valerie gently took my arm and guided me toward a quieter corner of the restaurant. "Oh, don't be dramatic, sweetie," she said smoothly. "I didn't steal anything. I created an opportunity. Besides, the recipe needed some professional refinement. Chef Lorenzo has elevated it considerably. You should be flattered." "Flattered?" My voice was shaking with anger. "You took something sacred to me. Something that belonged to Nana, and now you're profiting from it. How could you do this? To me? To her memory?" Valerie sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Sophia, this is business. You had a recipe, but no way to bring it to market. I had the resources and the right connections. That's how the world works." She squeezed my arm slightly, lowering her voice. "And besides, we changed just enough that legally, it's not the same recipe anymore." I pulled away from her touch, my eyes burning. "This isn't about what's legal," I said. "It's about family, trust, and respect." For just a moment, I saw something in her expression. Maybe guilt, maybe regret, disappear just as quickly. She flashed one of her practiced smiles as another customer approached her, gushing about how much they loved the food. "We'll talk later," she murmured before turning to greet the guest with a dazzling fake grin. I didn't say another word. I just walked out, tears blurring my vision, my heart pounding with anger and heartbreak. The success of Nana's table was swift and overwhelming. Within 2 months, it had received a glowing review in the Boston Globe. By month 3, reservations were booked solid 6 weeks in advance. The pasta e fagioli con le cozze became their signature dish, the one that food bloggers and critics couldn't stop raving about. Meanwhile, I was struggling with a depth of betrayal I'd never experienced before. I threw myself into my work at the restaurant where I was employed, taking extra shifts and staying late to develop new recipes for their menu. Cooking had always been my therapy, my joy, but now it was tinged with bitterness. Every time I picked up a knife, I thought of Nana and the promise I had made to her. My relationship with my family became strained. While they agreed that what Valerie had done was wrong, they also thought I was overreacting. "It's just a recipe," my brother said during a particularly heated argument, "and it's not like you were doing anything with it anyway." But it wasn't just a recipe to me. It was a connection to my grandmother, to my heritage. It was the foundation of a dream I'd been working toward for years. And now, every time someone in Providence thought of exceptional pasta e fagioli, they would think of Nana's table and Chef Lorenzo, not my grandmother's legacy or my future restaurant. 3 months after my confrontation with Valerie at the restaurant, she called me out of the blue. "Sophia, darling, I need your expertise." No preamble, no acknowledgement of the rift between us, just Valerie, assuming that her needs superseded any conflict. "What do you want, Valerie?" My voice was flat, drained of the anger that had consumed me in the early days after discovering her betrayal. Now I just felt tired. "We're expanding the menu at Nana's table. Lorenzo is brilliant with the dishes we have, but we need more authentic family recipes to maintain our concept. I'd like to bring you on as a consultant. The pay would be excellent, of course." I actually laughed out loud, a sharp, humorless sound that surprised even me. "You're joking, right? You steal my recipe, build a restaurant around it, and now you want me to give you more?" "I prefer to think of it as offering you an opportunity to be part of something successful." Valerie replied smoothly. "Look, Sophia, the restaurant is doing wonderfully, but we need to keep evolving. Your grandmother had dozens of recipes. Working together, we could preserve her legacy in a way that benefits us both." "Her legacy." I repeated the word slowly. "You didn't know her, Valerie. You barely spoke to her when she was alive. You made fun of her accent and rolled your eyes at her traditions. You don't get to claim her legacy now that there's profit in it." There was a long pause on the line. When Valerie spoke again, there was an edge to her voice I hadn't heard before. "Be reasonable, Sophia. This is business. I've turned your family recipe into a gold mine. You should be thanking me for seeing its potential when all you did was keep it to yourself like some kind of culinary miser." "I was honoring a promise." "Well, while you were honoring promises, I was building a business. And now I'm offering you a chance to be part of it. Think about it. You'd have creative input, a platform for your talents, and financial security. Isn't that what you always wanted?" "Not like this," I said quietly. "Never like this." After hanging up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, thinking about Nana, about promises, about dreams deferred, and slowly an idea began to form. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Instead of going in, I spent the whole day in my kitchen, pulling out Nana's old recipe cards and the journal where I had written down my own versions of her classic dishes over the years. I chopped, stirred, tasted, and adjusted, letting myself get lost in the familiar motions that had always made me feel close to her. By the evening, I had a plan. This wasn't about revenge. Nana would never have wanted that. This was about taking back my voice, my heritage, and my future on my terms. First, I hired a lawyer to send a cease and desist letter to Nana's table. While I couldn't prove I owned the recipe, I could challenge them on their misleading marketing, especially their use of Nana and their false claims about the origins of their signature dish. The lawyer warned me that food copyright cases were hard to win, but that wasn't the point. I wanted them to know I wasn't going to let them steal my family's history without a fight. Next, I went to my boss at the restaurant where I worked and pitched an idea, a night in Naples. It would be a special event featuring authentic Neapolitan food made from real family recipes. I would design the menu, focusing on dishes that weren't well known outside of Italy, showing that true Italian cuisine went far beyond the usual pasta and pizza. And yes, I would include my own version of pasta e fagioli con le cozze. Not exactly Nana's recipe, but the version I had developed over years of practice and training. My boss loved the idea and gave me the green light. We scheduled the event for 6 weeks later, giving me time to fine-tune the menu while still working my regular shifts. In the meantime, I started a food blog called Cooking with Heart. There, I wrote about my childhood, growing up in an Italian-American family, and everything Nana had taught me in the kitchen. I didn't post her exact recipes, but I shared their history, the techniques behind them, and what they meant to me. I even posted photos, some of Nana and me cooking together, others of her handwritten recipe cards, with the ingredients blurred out. To my surprise, the blog took off quickly. People connected with my stories, with the love and tradition behind my cooking. Some even commented that they had been to Nana's table, and, while the food was good, it felt like something was missing, that special warmth that made Italian home cooking so special. Then, A Night in Naples sold out within days of being announced. I spent weeks testing recipes, finding the best ingredients, and teaching the kitchen staff how to prepare everything the right way. The night of the event, as I prepared my pasta e fagioli con le cozze, my hands trembled slightly. Before I added the secret ingredient, I whispered a quiet thank you to Nana. The response was incredible. People loved the food, praising the balance of flavors and the passion behind every dish. Some diners who had eaten at Nana's table told me my pasta e fagioli was better, more authentic, more soulful. A local food critic attended and wrote a glowing review saying that my food showed a deep love and respect for tradition in every bite. Because of that success, the restaurant decided to make Regional Italian Nights a regular event, with me designing menus that highlighted different parts of Italy. My blog kept growing, and soon I was getting invitations to food festivals and cooking demos. For the first time, I felt like I was making a name for myself, on my own terms. And then, 6 months after that phone call, Valerie walked into my restaurant. I was in the middle of prep for another special event when she appeared in the doorway. "You've made quite a name for yourself," she said, watching me chop herbs exactly the way Nana had taught me. "By the way, Lorenzo is furious about that cease and desist letter." I didn't even look up. "What do you want, Valerie?" She sighed and pulled out a stool at the prep table. "I just want to talk. Business to business. No family drama." I raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, moving on to slicing shallots into thin rounds. "Our pasta e fagioli isn't the same as yours anymore," she admitted. "Lorenzo tried, but something's missing." "Yes," I said calmly. "There is." She tilted her head. "The secret ingredient," she said. "I know you left it out when you told me the recipe." I allowed myself a small smile as I swept the shallots into a bowl. "Among other things." "I'm not here to ask for it," she said, surprising me. For the first time, I looked up at her. "I'm here to propose a partnership." She explained that while Nana's table was still doing well, the initial excitement had faded. They needed something new to bring people back. Meanwhile, my growing success had caught the attention of their investors. "What we're proposing is a collaboration," she said. "A series of events at both restaurants, marketed as 2 generations of Italian cuisine. Lorenzo would create menus for your restaurant, and you'd create menus for ours. We'd present it as a celebration of different interpretations of Italian food. Traditional versus modern, home style versus fine dining." I studied her face, looking for the catch. "And the pasta e fagioli? We'll acknowledge that our version was inspired by your family's recipe, but that it has evolved into something new. No more false stories about Lorenzo's grandmother." It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. "Why now?" I asked. "Why the sudden change of heart?" Valerie brushed an invisible speck from her expensive sleeve. "It's not a change of heart, it's business. Your reputation is growing, and fighting you publicly would only hurt both of us. Besides," she added with a small smirk, "family feuds are so tacky." I thought about her offer. Working with Valerie and Lorenzo would mean letting go of some of my anger. It would mean accepting that they had taken something from me, even if they were now willing to admit it. But it would also give me a bigger platform, more opportunities to showcase my cooking to a wider audience, something I would need if I ever wanted to open my own place. Finally, I set my knife down and met her gaze. "I'll think about it," I said, "but I have conditions." In the end, I agreed to the collaboration, but only on my terms. The advertisements had to clearly say that the pasta e fagioli served at Nana's table was inspired by my grandmother, Isabella Moretti. I would create 4 special menus for them over the next year, but they would be my own recipes, not family ones. And most importantly, Valerie would use her connections to help me get a small business loan so I could start the process of opening my own restaurant. If needed, she would even co-sign the loan. It wasn't a perfect solution. A part of me still felt angry at Valerie for stealing what was mine. She had taken a shortcut to success while I had worked hard for years, paying my dues in restaurant kitchens. But as Nana used to say, sometimes a little bitterness makes the dish sweeter. The collaboration was a huge success. The 2 Generations events sold out instantly, getting attention from regional and even national food critics. Over time, Lorenzo and I developed a wary respect for each other. We would probably never be friends, but at least we could work together. And Valerie kept her promise. She introduced me to investors and helped me understand the complicated world of restaurant financing. 3 months ago, I signed a lease on my own restaurant. It's a small storefront just 2 blocks away from Nana's table. The space needs a lot of work, but the location is perfect, close enough to get foot traffic, but with a reasonable rent. When it opens next spring, my restaurant will be called Isabella's, in honor of Nana. As for the pasta e fagioli con le cozze, I've decided it won't be on my regular menu. Instead, I'll serve it as a special dish once a month. A portion of the money from each bowl will go toward a scholarship fund for culinary students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Each serving will come with a small card telling the story of Nana Isabella and her belief that cooking with heart is a gift meant to be shared. I still miss Nana every day, especially now as I work to bring my dream to life. But I know her legacy lives on, not just in her recipes, but in the lessons she taught me. Hard work, resilience, and the belief that love is the most important ingredient in any dish.
So, that's Sarah's story. A betrayal that led to an unexpected opportunity, a journey of finding her voice when someone tried to silence her, and a way to honor traditions while creating new ones. Have you ever faced a betrayal that led you to something even better? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this story, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update.